Welcome to the Generation Why Not podcast with Ruth Klein, a 6-time best-selling author, creative brand strategist, and book coach for small businesses, entrepreneurs, authors, mompreneurs, and professionals today. She is the president of the award-winning firm Expert Celebrity Branding, and the Wall Street Journal calls her the marketing maven. This podcast will be interviewing this generation, those who are doing things differently because of their perceptual shift of what success looks like, and who are driven by attitude, not age. They know anything is possible, and you'll hear how this generation feels the fear and keeps going anyway to achieve their goals and dreams, whether they be in business, sports, the arts, or lifestyle.
Welcome to Generation Why Not. My name is Ruth Klein, and we're going to be interviewing a wonderful, wonderful, intriguing person today. But before we do, what is Generation Why Not? It is a generation that looks for innovation, creativity, and they don't stop at no. In fact, when they get the word no, they start to become creative and figure out a way to do other things. And what's so wonderful is that I call Generation Why Not perceptual disruptors, because this generation is driven by attitude, not age. And the old patterns of looking at generational demographics of age and gender and income are no longer useful as it once was. And so it takes this Generation Why Not, to be the innovators that will take us to the next place to solve a lot of our issues and problems and challenges and make this a place that is inspiring to live in. So today, I have a very, very wonderful guest, and I was honored to meet her at a function, and it was a networking function, and I was impressed with her from the moment that we chatted. And her name is Dr. Gloria Chance, and she is an author, a humanist psychologist, and multi-industry C-suite executive. I love that, multi-industry, with over 20 years of experience as an intrepreneur, disruptor, and innovator in large enterprises. And Dr. Chance has won many awards. 2 of them are Most Powerful Women in Banking, Business Alumni of the Year, and many others. And it's interesting because after years of applying creativity, innovation, and emerging trends through technology, Dr. Gloria Chance followed her intrigue for creativity and how the mind and imagination works. And she received a PhD in psychology with a focus in creativity and organizational systems. I love that. I didn't even know there was such a thing. Based on her experience and research, Dr. Gloria believes that, and I love what she has to say, as we evolve from the information age to the imagination age, the human imagination is the foundational value in the new economy. That is just amazing. And she is the co-author of The Female Factor, Using the Imagination for Daily Health. She has an upcoming book due very shortly. And please help me welcome Dr. Gloria Chance.
Ruth, thank you so much for having me today. That was quite an introduction. I was like, who is she talking about?
It's so interesting. It's true, right? You work so diligently for so many years, and you do your magic, and you do what your spirit calls you to do, and you work for all these years, and you've accumulated so much. And then when it's time to be introduced, it's like, wow. All right, is that me?
Right, I'm exhausted listening to myself. And, Ruth, I think what I'm always reminded of, where I come from. And I think about being this poor little brown girl growing up in the streets of Brooklyn. And, even today, my family wasn't educated, like many of us in our age range. And, when I look at some of the things and experiences that I've been able to have, there's a big part of me that still feels like that little brown poor girl running the streets of New York,
Yeah. No, I get that. Do you know, I love that. I actually love that. I love that. I wrote it down. Poor little brown girl in the streets of Brooklyn. Wouldn't that be a fun case study? Every single
it's a study of my life. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
And the reason that I ended up going into studying the imagination is because as a child, I didn't have access to a lot of things but other than my mind. And I spent a lot of time reading and imagining that I was a character in many of the stories that I read about, castles and magic and all these beautiful things. And so my imagination saved me from a really bad part of Brooklyn. Being able to think about, dream about, wonder about what I could be, would be, I think was something that really saved me. And what I know in the work that I do with individuals and organizations is that, when you dream, when you have dreams at an early age, when you're able to be curious and have wonder about things, that it actually sets the ambition and drive for your future.
I love that. And what happens, I find that as young people, we have these dreams and we can be anything we want at one point, and then all of a sudden that changes into, I don't even know what I want to do. I don't really know what my dreams are. How do you deal with that? What do you say to that group?
Well, it's so interesting.
Adults.
Yeah, in my upcoming book, I talk about the emerging and the re-emerging self. And there's this concept that I speak about a lot in my work called the spirit of creativity. And in my mind, the spirit of creativity is finding your creative self or regaining the understanding of your creative self, which really is humanistic, and it provides you the ability to have access to your whole self. And that is, in essence, Ruth, the major transition of adult life. Because from the time that we're 2 years old, remember the terrible twos, where all your parents say is no, no, no. What's actually happening there is, and bless us, we're doing it for the good. We think the good of the individual. But what we're really doing is we're beating the imagination and the creativity, in most cases, out of the child, because we're introducing, rightfully so, rules, regulations, belief systems that are passed down from our families and our ancestors and that are dictated by society. It's important to teach those things to children. However, it comes sometimes at the risk of the imagination. And so what happens is when we go through life, most people, unless they're disruptors, following rules and making sure that they stay in line, and that does actually start to kill your dreams. And so think about it. You go to a 9-to-5 job, which I am not putting down because I've had those, but a 9-to-5 job in some cases, depending on what the work is, can make you totally robotic, right? You do the same thing at the same time for the same people in the same way. And that actually shuts down the brain. And so before you know it, 20 years have passed and you wake up and you're like, what has happened to my life? What am I doing here? So it is a process where we lose ourselves in trying to live. And Drake has this great saying in one of his songs, Drake the rapper, and he says something about, not everybody, how does he say, everybody dies, but not everybody lives. And that's what happens is we actually end up not living because we're doing things that are so repetitive that we become robots or like puppets to what society says that we have to do and how our family thinks that we have to do things. And so that's to your question, to answer your question, that's how we lose ourselves. And to find ourselves, we have to go through a process that's similar to death, which is not negative. Death indicates that, like trees, the leaves die in the fall so that they can rejuvenate and have new leaves in the springtime. Well, that's actually what we have to do. We have to release and get rid of things that no longer serve us or that don't serve the purpose of being creative or being imaginative. But that requires a lot of courage, because now we've lived this robotic life, or this life that served us to raise our family or whatever for all of these years. And now we realize that we actually want something else, but that doesn't happen overnight. You have to find out what is that thing. And usually it's not an easy thing, right? It's something where, like for me, I gave up 7 years of my life, the life that I knew, to go back to school to study something that I really wanted to do. That was a great, great sacrifice. And it has been worth it, but it was scary, and I wasn't sure if it was going to pay off, and I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to be doing, because I was already working, being a disruptor, introducing new products and new concepts, but I wanted to understand how I could help other people do it. So following your dreams or re-emerging into your true creative self is not easy, but it is something. So it has to be something that you really want and you want to invest the time in, but you have to let some things die that no longer serve you, so that you can reemerge into this new, beautiful, creative, innovative, imaginative self.
Yeah, I love that. I really do love that. And, it's interesting. Every word has, a certain meaning. And when we think of death, we immediately, oh no. But you immediately said that's not a bad thing,
right?
Which I absolutely love.
Yeah, and it is. I think in this work, what I've found is that sometimes we have to reintroduce ourselves, mostly to ourselves. Like, who are you? Who was that person before they were 2 and told no? What were the dreams of that person? What were the dreams that people had? And, in my work, I look at something called the emotional imagination, which there hasn't been that much research on. But, in my work, what I look at helping people do to that end around reimagining themselves or going back to who they truly are is, being able to, through your emotional imagination, manifest, understand, and leverage sort of what is in your unconscious. So unconscious means your dreams, in your meditative state, in your, if you're journaling, or if you're in this place of being in a state of awe, like, when you travel on vacation and you ever have that moment where you're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm having an outer body experience because this is so different, but it's so refreshing, right? And the emotional imagination lets you kind of catch on to those types of feelings and then you can extend those into scenarios where you wonder, well, if I did this, how would this work? I mean, the scenarios could be as simple, like in business, as looking at strategy, like looking at how you would re-envision a new company. For individuals, it would be things like understanding empathy through your emotions. I did with the San Diego Writers Festival, a psychodrama, which included poetry and digital stories, et cetera, that help people step into someone else's shoes so that they could understand, be empathetic through emotional imagination about what other people might struggle with and live through. So this whole imagination and creativity and emotions is something that I think is the next step, as you mentioned in my bio, around the imagination age. And our ability, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love that. So let's kind of recoup a little bit here. I love this idea where you help people find their creativity, and in that space of creativity, it sounds like that's where they're able to be free to imagine. It's okay to have an imaginative life again. It's okay. In fact, I would imagine sometimes because we haven't lived in that imaginative creativity area so much, that sometimes I would imagine it's a little more difficult to get people there. So my question to you is, what are 3 steps or what are 3 things or 2 things that people can do specifically to help them get into that imaginative, emotional mode?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Ruth. So I think one of the most important things is, the emotional imagination or the imagination. There are 2 ways, right? We know about being a disruptive or having a creative idea. But the other part, which you're asking about the individual, which is where I go, is there is a whole lot of work that can be done through the imagination for healing. And that helps with trauma and getting over, different issues. It's a therapeutic process through the expressive arts. And so what I ask people to do always, number 1, is to remove stress. That stress is, as we know, the number 1 killer. It causes heart disease and so many other physical issues, but also you cannot be your creative self if you are stressed out. So you have to learn techniques like meditation, guided imagery, and also to retrain your brain. So I ask people to do simple things like take a shower in the dark, because in your brain, back to that robotic piece, you're trying to break that cycle of being a robot. So doing something weird, like taking a shower in the dark, which might not be weird to some people, but it is to others, that starts to break. Taking a different route to work, changing up the times that you do things, not being routine and robotic is important, reducing stress, and also journaling. Journaling, one of the things I get people to do is sort of this where you journal with your non-dominant hand, and you basically get everything out on a page without looking. You just write, because you don't reread it because it looks like garbage, and then you throw it away. And that's another way to clear your mind. So many of the techniques are about getting to a state of being open and ready to imagine and envision, and that requires reducing stress and stopping routine.
Okay, great. Okay, what's the second one? I love that.
Well, those were kind of like 3 in 1, but they're all,
I see.
Yeah, they're kind of all related. The number 1 step is stress reduction. Now, there are different ways to do that. I have a lot of techniques like, using laughter. We know that laughter is a good way to reduce stress and to get you comfortable, to decrease your blood pressure, etc. And so a lot of the techniques are, the steps are really about finding a technique that works for you to reduce stress. And then from there, it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to get rid of fear, then a lot of the things that you would do would be to do rehearsals in your mind around outcomes. So if you're afraid of something, then I help people rehearse things in their mind, because the mind doesn't know if once you rehearse something, the mind thinks that you actually did it. And so there are a lot of ways to trick the mind so that, again, you're getting out of your way so that you can be creative. But, it's individual. The thing about this work is it is individual. It's based on what trauma you have or what your belief systems are, what the story you're telling yourself is. Once we can get through those barriers, then you're able to get more comfortable in your creativity. So there's not a cookie cutter, and it is not always easy.
Right. Let me ask you, so I get that lower stress, and that makes perfect sense because you're clearing your mind and you're reducing stress, and you're kind of, okay, that is great. And through all these different modalities, which I love. And then how do people tap into, now that they're at that level with that lower stress, it's like an artist, right? The canvas is all set. Or as a writer, I know that, my computer is ready at hand. I open up to a chapter. It's blank right now, and I'm going to write. So from that place of lowered stress, what is something that they can do to tap into their creative imagination?
So one of the things, there are all types of, again, depending on what you're trying to do, but one of the things that I think is so important that I work with people on is understanding their story. So what is driving you? So in order to get, there's another layer to get to your creative self, and that's about understanding your mindset, because your imagination and your story is driven by your mindset. And that means, what is it? Do I believe that you must work hard and around the clock in order to be successful? Well, if that's your mindset, you're still not going to be creative, because creativity requires you in some cases to do nothing. It's about letting go and releasing. So part of that is getting deeper into the layer of who you are and what stories have driven the behaviors that you show up with every day. So it is getting to a deeper level before the canvas is clear.
Okay. I love that. I love that. So that's really, for me, I love steps. That really would be step 2, is to identify your mindset and your story.
Yeah, I mean, then, if you have to have steps, that's back to the routine, right? Because right, I mean, you have to. So you're trying to make me do routine, and I'm not going to, because it is individual, and creativity is also about soaring. So this is the main thing that I'm trying to get to. If you don't have clarity or focus around who you are and what your dreams are, then you cannot soar. You cannot soar to a place of creativity.
Right.
So that's really it. So, if you had to have steps, it really would be one step, which is know thyself. If you can know yourself, if you can know who you are, then you start to get to the level of creativity. And how you get to knowing who you are is different for everyone. Now, I have a formula. I use this thing called personal mythology that helps you identify your story. And then the story that you've been telling all your life, deconstruct that story into what it is that you want to do, trying to find who you really are from a creativity standpoint, understanding the obstacles and what I call the mythology that has driven your life so far. And then finding how to combat and get rid of, back to the death, sort of kill that old self, so to speak, the parts of yourself that won't serve the creativity, and then rewrite the story. So if I had to say steps, those would be the steps based on a specific process that I use.
I love that. I love that. So let me ask you, Dr. Gloria, what was a pivotal moment where you decided to make changes in your own business or life?
I sometimes call myself, and I'm going to do air quotes, because then anybody who knows me and hears this better not say, oh, yeah, right, she's not kidding. But I air quote crazy lady, because I have always been one of these people who would just get up and reinvent herself. It didn't matter how well things were going. I was at the top of my career in banking when I pivoted and decided, you know what, I'm going to take early retirement because I want to do something else. I'm intrigued. I've worked in probably 9 different industries, not because I job hop, but because I'm fascinated by learning. I'm fascinated by understanding how things work. I like challenging myself and saying, if I did this, what would happen? I like, to imagine something and then go, well, let me imagine this and then let me go do it. So I think that my life in general has been pivotal, in so like almost weekly, if not daily. So there's never a dull moment with me, for sure.
I love that. I love that. That makes sense.
No, it really is. And so, when I think about myself, and, I started a company a couple of years ago called the Musai Group, and Musai is Greek for muse. And what I ultimately am is a source of inspiration. I like to bring the arts and sciences into muse people and organizations, and inspiring them to, again, be at their highest human potential, which is their creative, the manifestation of the creativity. And how that plays out and how that shows up is really up to the individual or the organization. But I'm there to inspire, to push, to encourage, and to support that transformation.
What a phenomenal opportunity these corporations and individuals have in having you help guide them through this, because you're right. The real economy today is innovation and creativity. It's definitely the case. And I love that you said that. So your website is themassaigroup.com, correct?
It is themassaigroup.com.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Dr. Chance, let me ask you one more question. If you had only one thing to share with our listeners to get them going, what would that be?
I would just say that it is important to build communities. I just want to say that right now when we look at social media and where we are today in the world, I think that the isolation and the, sort of fake worlds that we create, that's not using imagination. That's actually killing imagination, also killing communities. So I would say the creativity and the imagination is about coming together as a community, and that the more that we can imagine together, the better off that we'll be as a society.
I love that. I love that. Community is so, so important. So important. Dr. Gloria, thank you so much for sharing some wonderful, wonderful information with our listeners. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I do just want to mention to follow me on Instagram, Dr. Gloria Chance, also on Twitter, Dr. Gloria Chance, and also catch the Blend Talk Show, which is a mind, body, spirit show that I am the co-host on Uplift TV on all the cable networks. Thank you so much, Ruth, for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Chance, so much. And yes, we definitely want to follow you and watch you on your show. That's so exciting. Thank you again.
You're welcome, Ruth. Bye-bye.
So isn't this amazing? It all started with and I'm using Dr. Gloria's words, which are so powerful. It started with poor little brown girl in the streets of Brooklyn. I don't know why I love that so much. Maybe because it's so visual. Maybe because every word is so important to humanity, to community, to creativity, to moving forward. Whatever that is, just hit me so powerfully. And in this spirit of creativity with Dr. Gloria, it's really about finding your creative self again. And I love how Dr. Gloria mentioned it's a death, and that's okay, because when we think of death in terms of nature, it works for us. We have that fall, and we had all those beautiful leaves on the tree in the summer and the fruit, and all of a sudden the leaves are falling, and there's a chance for refresh and rebirth. And so that's basically what happens with us as well, she's saying, and it's emerging into our real creative and real self. And I love this. I love the term that Dr. Gloria coined, emotional imagination, reimagining who you are. Love that. Emotional imagination. So it's the creativity piece, but also bringing it to that gut, that emotional piece. And I love also how Dr. Gloria is using this emotional imagination in corporations, with people personally changing careers, with lowering stress, with trauma, with really quite anything in terms of reimagining yourself and reinventing yourself and recreating yourself or your company or a corporation. It's very, very powerful. And I think the more important thing for each of us is to stay open to our imagination and our dreams, because in that space, as Dr. Gloria so profoundly shared with us, that's the new story. That's where we get a chance to really reemerge, refresh, and recreate. Thank you so much for joining me, Generation Why Not, where we include second and third acts, just as Dr. Gloria did in her life. And these second and third acts actually play a very vital role in this new generation, from people going from corporate to becoming entrepreneurs, sculptors, or writers, from 60-somethings to octogenarians, to 20-somethings to 80-somethings and back and forth. Thank you so much. Until next time, wishing you well.
Thank you for joining Generation Why Not. We look forward to receiving any questions you may have, as Ruth will be answering them on this podcast. Follow Ruth.Klein on Instagram or email rklein@ruthklein.com. Until next time, a short reminder that success is driven by attitude, not age.